This is Holding Court with Patrick McEnroe.
All right, everyone, I'm back. Season 4 of Holding Court. It's been a great 3 years. Looking forward to Season 4. I've had a couple of podcasts popped in the last couple of months, but this is where we officially kick off Season 4 of the pod. So big thanks to my partners at Mudhouse Media for pushing me along. We've got video as well this year. We've got some new sponsors, which I'm very excited about. I'll tell you more about that as we move along. Some of the themes this season, mental health will certainly be at the top of the list. I'll kick it off the week after next with Dr. Jim Loehr. Many of you from the tennis world know him and all he's done in the world of tennis, but also in the world of mental health. He was actually at the forefront of so much of this discussion years and years ago when I was a teenager, actually playing tennis. So you will love this particular podcast. He's been on here before on Holding Court, and we'll discuss his new book and just where we are in that space overall. Later this week, Thursday, Chris Fenton. Of course, you've heard him with me before on Holding Court discussing all things China. Of course, new news coming from the WTA recently. We actually recorded the podcast with Chris before that news came out, but he always gives us such a great overview of what's going on in China, whether it's sports related, entertainment related. So we spoke with him, and you're going to be fascinated to hear what he has to say. So that's going to be week 1. Of course, podcast here, kicking things off. I'm going to discuss things that have been happening in the tennis world the last couple of months. Let's start with the men. I mean, obviously, Djokovic dominated at the Australian. Medvedev went out early, but since the Australian ended, it's really been Daniil Medvedev. In fact, if you look at the race points thus far this year, we're sort of through about the first third of the tennis season, mid-April right now. Monte Carlo just finished. I'll discuss that as well, the first big clay court event. Medvedev, though, since Australia, remember he lost to Sebastian Korda, who, by the way, we haven't heard from at all because of injuries. So we hope that he's recovering well. I hope to see him back a little bit on the clay, but that he needs to be back 100% come grass court season because I really think Seb Korda could do some major damage on the grass at Wimbledon. Medvedev, though, goes to the Middle East, beats Djokovic in one of the tournaments after the Australian Open there, wins that, goes on a tear. In fact, I think it was 3 tournaments in a row. He had a couple indoor wins in Europe as well. Comes to Indian Wells, the first big hard court tournament in the spring. Of course, part of the Sunshine Double in the United States. And then it was Carlos Alcaraz, his coming out party for 2023. He did play a couple of clay court tournaments, Alcaraz, in South America after the Australian Open. Won one. Lost in the final of another one to Norrie. Played a lot of matches. Actually had a lot of long matches down there. Got a little bit nicked up with, I believe it was the leg, so he pulled out of one of the tournaments in Acapulco. That allowed him to rest up and, of course, come in to the BNP Paribas Open in Indian Wells looking awfully good. And I was out there for a number of days doing some work with BNP, who, as many of you know, sponsors, of course, a lot of professional tennis, but also our tennis academy, the John McEnroe Tennis Academy in New York City. So they give a lot of funding to us. So I go out there. We do some events with them, thank them for all they do for us. I got to be there courtside when Alcaraz came out for his first match under the lights. And not only was his game electric, but the crowd was electric because of the attitude that this guy brings to the court, just the star power that he brings. And you could feel that out there in the desert. I wasn't there until the end of the tournament, but I got to see him play a couple of matches. Of course, watch the final on TV, on Tennis Channel. Just a remarkable display from Alcaraz beating Medvedev in that championship match, actually destroying him in that match. Medvedev, of course, had another great tournament. I started with him. And he actually talked quite a bit about not liking the conditions out there. The court playing a bit slower than the players were used to. Of course, the altitude does make things speed up, but Indian Wells is known for being very gritty conditions, but it seemed like this year the players were noting that it was even slower than it had been in years past. Even that being said, Medvedev managed to get through to the championship match where he was just thoroughly manhandled by Carlos Alcaraz. So it was a tremendous display. Alcaraz sort of re-announcing himself. Of course, we all want to see Djokovic, Alcaraz. That's a match that so many of us are hoping to see. Maybe we'll see it on the red clay in Europe. Then you head to, on the men's side, I'll get to the women after the break, by the way. Then on the in Miami tournament, you go there. Alcaraz is continuing to play well. Remember, he'd beaten Sinner in Indian Wells. They play again in Miami in the semifinals. Another tremendous atmosphere between these two. Sinner ends up winning it. A very, very physical battle. Ended, I think it was a Saturday night match, or did they have a day off? I think it was a Saturday night that they had to play the final the next day. I don't know, because I was a little consumed by the pickleball slam, which I was at, by the way, down in Hollywood, Florida at the Hard Rock Casino. That's another story for another day. We could do a whole topic on the pickleball slam, of which, probably we should do at some point. But I'm down there covering that. I didn't see, because it was on at the same time for at least an hour. The pickleball slam was on ESPN. On Tennis Channel was the Sinner Medvedev final in Miami. I was texting with Jim Courier, who was calling the match. While I was calling pickleball, he was calling the tennis. And he said, Sinner didn't have anything left in the tank. He was physically, I guess he woke up not feeling well. Maybe he was a little bit under the weather. So Medvedev rolled through him in that. Well, I think it was 5-4 in the final, 5-3. Point being, what I take out of this sort of swing was Medvedev's refound his A game. Of course, he kind of didn't go totally away, but certainly didn't play anywhere near his best from that loss to Rafael Nadal in the 2022 Australian Open final. Really took him a while, I think, to recover from that. Never really did in 2022, although he still finished in the top 10, which tells you something about how good the guy is. Of course, he wasn't able to play Wimbledon because of the Russian and Belarusian ban, which has been lifted, by the way, by Wimbledon. So that's certainly another topic, excuse me, that we'll get into along the way. I mean, nothing's changed, right? So I guess Wimbledon admitting that they made a mistake. That's the bottom line, which I've noted countless times over the course of the last 9 months. So Medvedev reestablishing himself. He's actually got the most points, as I said, earned this year, just in 2023. He leads the race to Turin. That's where the ATP finals happen. Djokovic, of course, right there, having won the Australian Open. Alcaraz right near the top. I think he's 3 or 4. Sinner is there as well. Tsitsipas has been kind of dealing with a little bit of a shoulder issue. It appears he's trying to, not appears, he's trying to play through it, but he doesn't look like he's anywhere near 100%. Remember, he'd won Monte Carlo the last couple of years, lost to Taylor Fritz, who had his best tournament ever in his career. He's played awfully well this year, Fritz. He's in the race. I'm going to look at the race numbers right here, because Fritz made the semis, which was his best performance in a big clay court tournament. So let me look at the rankings right here. Race to Turin. You've got Djokovic, Medvedev first, as I said, Djokovic, Sinner, Alcaraz, Rublev, of course, who just won Monte Carlo. Huge win for him, his first Masters 1000 title. Tsitsipas is at 6. So Fritz is 7 in the points for this year. That's just for this year. Tommy Paul, 9. Tiafoe at 12, who had a win at the Red Clay Court tournament in Houston. They were besieged by rain for a couple of days, so Tiafoe had to play 4 matches in the final 2 days to win that event. I think that's his first clay court title. I think he won one other title in his career. The other guy we got to mention is Holger Rune, who I love him. He's got the personality, of course, which has rubbed some of the players the wrong way in his first couple of years on tour. I think that he'll evolve. He's cocky. Okay, he's cocky. And he sometimes, that thing with Wawrinka in Paris last year, where Wawrinka sort of pulled him in when they shook hands, which Rune won that, and then he went on to win the tournament. Remember, he beat Djokovic in the final. That was indoors in Paris last fall. Wawrinka pulled him in and said, listen, you can't act like this, grow up, basically. And then Wawrinka beat him. I believe it was in Indian Wells. He beat him, and then Rune said, well, do you have anything to say now? So I kind of like that. I do think that you sort of get policed by the other players, and you got to have a respect level. But what I love about what he brings to the table is he's got the same kind of energy that Alcaraz has. He's very jumpy. He's extremely athletic. You saw him hit a couple balls into the crowd. If you saw the Monte Carlo final, which was a great match, he had points to go up 5-1 in that final set against Andrei Rublev. Rublev hung in there, continued to battle, and it was late in the set where Rune doubled a couple of times and hit a couple balls out of the stands, which is an automatic fine if you do that, if you hit it into the crowd. And the crowd started booing him, so he says to bring it on, let me hear more of it. Tennis needs that. We need that. I don't like it when you get, do stuff that's unsportsmanlike to your opponent and things like that. But you like his personality. I think that if he gets a little bit more consistent, Rune, he still makes mistakes sort of out of nowhere, and that's why even those couple doubles came in. You see him just spray balls. If he can clean that up, he's become a little bit more disciplined in his shot selection, particularly at big moments, I think this guy's a potential Grand Slam winner, no doubt about it, but particularly on clay and a slowish hardcourt, because he can generate some serious firepower off both sides. He likes to play the drop shot a la Alcaraz. He's not afraid to try stuff, which in the era that we've been living in, people saying everybody plays the same, they play from the baseline, it's the same type of game. Now you're seeing these guys come with major game, with the slice, with the ability to come forward, like Alcaraz, like Rune. Sinner is just a massive hitter and a great mover and a great mentality. He doesn't quite have the mid-court game that those guys have, but with that Killer Cahill, my buddy from ESPN, coaching him, he's going to work on a lot of that stuff. And I just love Sinner's work ethic. So when you look at those three guys, you throw maybe Korda when he comes back healthy. He's similar age, than maybe a year or so older. Obviously, you've got the more younger veteran American guys like Fritz, Tiafoe, Tommy Paul. Those guys are more 24, 25, but really doing well. Paul, I think, is top 20 at the moment. So you like to see where tennis is going on the men's side. And, of course, now let's go to Djokovic a bit, because he played in Monte Carlo. Of course, he wasn't allowed to come and play in the U.S. You know my thoughts on that. I hope it happens by the U.S. Open when they lift these sanctions on unvaccinated foreigners. But that's far away. Now he's going to be able to play a full clay court season, as he himself said after losing to Musetti in his second match in Monte Carlo. He's, as we all know with Djokovic, even though he's an unbelievable clay court player, won the French a couple of times and won multiple Masters series on clay, it's the surface that's the most challenging for him. It's the one that he needs the most practice, maybe not even his practice as much as he says match play. So he's playing this week in Bosnia, his foundation sponsoring that tournament, of course, close to where he's from in Serbia. That tournament used to be in Serbia, but they've moved it to Bosnia. Banja Luka is the name of the city it's in. So he will get started. Actually, Wawrinka, I was just watching, was playing his match against a youngster from France who's one of the good young up-and-comers. He's been winning a ton of matches on the Challenger circuit. Let me get his name because I'm spacing right now on it. Tournaments, we're in Bosnia, Herzegovina. Luka Van Acha, who just won. Actually, he just beat Wawrinka 6-4 in the third. So it would have been nice to see Stan the man against Joker, because if they've had some epic battles in huge matches. Of course, Stan beating him in the Australian Open. U.S. Open final, I think he beat him in the final there as well. Anyway, Stan has done well to come back from his injuries, but he's well past his prime. So we'll see how this young French guy does. So Joker is going to play there. He's going to probably play. Will he play Madrid and Rome? He'll play at least one of those. It sort of depends probably on how he does in this tournament. The other, of course, big story for the men, the big question mark, I think I've mentioned all the guys that you expect to be in contention at the French. Casper Ruud would be the other. He's dipped off a little bit this year, which is not that unexpected after reaching two major finals last year. I thought he played above his weight a little bit last year. So if he can hang around that, 5 to 8 range, I think that would be a good effort for him. But clay is going to be important. I think it was did he win Estoril? He played deep somewhere in one of those earlier clay court tournaments. So we'll see how he does. we've got a bunch of tournaments this week because you've got Barcelona going on. I'm going to get to Nadal in a second. He usually owns Barcelona. I think he's won it like 1,000,009 times or something. He calls it his home tournament, even though he's from Mallorca. He spent a lot of time at that beautiful club there in Barcelona. You've got Munich going on this week. You've got the tournament that Joker's in Bosnia. So there's 3 men's tournaments this week. There's also a big women's tournament. I'll get to the women after the break in Stuttgart. That's always one of the most popular stops on the tour for the women. It's an indoor clay court tournament, so that's the way they sort of ease into it. Of course, they had Charleston a couple weeks ago here in the U.S. on the green clay, which is an awesome event as well. So Joker will try to get those matches in. He's obviously, concerned about one thing and one thing only. That's the French, making sure he's ready for that. And my suspicion is he will absolutely be ready for that. The question about Rafa is much dodgier. We don't know if he's going to be ready. We've seen some video of him practicing. Normally, he likes to play a lot on clay to get himself ready. He's the kind of guy that needs to get matches, but does he really need that many matches at this point in his career? If he's physically fit, that's the number one thing for him because he can play his way into the French in the first couple of rounds. I mean, he usually just steamrolls people in those first couple of rounds. That gets him court time. That gets him out there for a couple hours at a stretch. So, he normally in most of his years, you would say, because you look at his results, he's dropped down to like 15, by the way, in the rankings. That'll be another interesting thing. The French Federation, who, of course, makes the draws and the seedings, they've always gone exactly by the rules. Not the rules, the rankings, whatever the rankings say. I went crazy about this. Was it last year or the year before when Rafa had to play Joker? I think it was in the quarters. Was that what year was that when Rafa won it? He beat him in the final in the pandemic year. Then they played again. I'm losing track. Rafa won it again last year. We know that. So I didn't like that, but I don't think they're going to change. I mean, if they didn't change last year, it's hard to imagine that they're going to put Rafa, the 1 or 2 seed, which I personally think they should, or at least top 4, because now he's going to be, unless he goes on some run in these clay court tournaments, which is looking unlikely just based on how many he's going to play, he's going to be well outside the top 10 come time for Roland Garros. So that, I think, is the biggest question mark that we're all sort of want to have answered. I think we know who are going to be the serious contenders. Alcaraz, was great on clay last year. Does he have, the patience if he needs it? He's such a shot maker. I think in the long run, he's going to be a better hard court player than clay. But he moves, unbelievably well. It's just sometimes you feel like, maybe he plays too aggressively to be that good on clay. To go up, to beat a Djokovic, to beat a Rafa best of 5. Haruna, we'll see where he goes. If anyone else appears to have a shot. Rude is the kind of guy that make you hit 1,000,000 balls on a clay court. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered in the next couple of weeks on the men's side. So we'll take a little quick break now. We'll move over and talk about how the women have looked in this post-Australia world of professional tennis. Patrick McEnroe here on Holding Court. North Organic CBD is our sponsor here on Holding Court. I love their CBD gummies. They come in 2 delicious flavors, strawberry lemonade and green apple. I take both. Both are amazing. 1 a day, and you are totally okay. I love to stay active. I still play tennis regularly. I love to hike. I love to go to the gym. That's why I use North Organics CBD. Their products are made in the USA. They're high quality, broad spectrum organic CBD products for everyday adventures. And don't forget about the very popular CBD salve. Immediate relief of any physical pain. I use it on my shoulder. Although I'm not serving quite as big as I used to, but you know what I mean. I use it daily for the shoulders, as I said, for the knees, for the hips, you name it. It works wonders. Go to northorganicscbd.com and enter Patrick20. That's Patrick20 for 20% off your order. right, Patrick McEnroe back on Holding Court. Let's turn our attention now to the women's tour, the WTA. By the way, they made the announcement recently that they'll be going back to China for their year-end championships. I have to admit, it was a little bit of a hit in the gut to me. I've been so proud of what Steve Simon, of course, who's the CEO of the WTA and the tour, has done in the last 16 to 18 months in taking a stand because of the Peng Shuai situation. We still haven't heard from her in a public setting. They claim, the WTA, that they've heard through other sources that she's in Beijing, that she's okay, that she's living a quote-unquote normal life. Of course, these were not the parameters they laid out to China and the Chinese Tennis Federation over a year ago. But as I said the other day on CNN when I went on to discuss this, I mean, can you really blame them? I mean, if you're gonna crap on the WTA for making this move now, okay, then you better crap on the NBA, Apple. I mean, every big company in the world, where we get our shirts, and our shoes made. I mean, come on. It's all about business. It's all about money. So while I was very impressed with the WTA taking a stand, and by the way, it cost them millions of dollars, okay, because they, even though there were no tournaments going on during the pandemic in China, so China now having lifted most of their restrictions from COVID, it appears that there's going to be professional tennis back in China, both the men and the women, later this year. So that's where, obviously, there were discussions going on amongst the WTA and the Chinese Tennis Federation that this was going to happen. And the WTA had to play the year-end championships. One year was in Texas. It was a disaster. I mean, there's nobody there. They played it in Mexico one year. It was a little better, but still, they're just not getting nearly the money that they'd had guaranteed for them in China. So if you're going to go after them, and I'm not going to go after them because I get it. Because look, as I said, I was proud of them for taking the stand. It got a lot of attention. It brought attention to it. They claim when they go back there, they'll try to bring attention to, these types of issues with the Peng Shuai, with its overall human rights and so on. Well, then you got to do that when the players go to Qatar and go to the Middle East and go to Saudi Arabia to play an exhibition tournament and get paid a fortune. So it is what it is. As I said about the Qatar situation, or Qatar, however you want to pronounce it, World Cup went on there. We talked about that on CNN and other places, that, about the human rights abuses that go on there, that went on in building all these stadiums. But guess what? The World Cup happened. It was a tremendous event, the World Cup. And I think we have to take the tact that we have to work with these other countries and with China. And by the way, Chris Fenton, who, as I mentioned earlier, he's going to be my guest on Thursday. Okay, so he has unbelievable views and feedback. I've learned a lot from him, listening to him over the years and kind of getting the feel for how the best way to move forward in handling this situation. So anyway, the WTA going back. Let's talk about what's happened on the court this year. Of course, Sabalenka wins the Australian Open, her first major. Unbelievable final there against Rybakina, who's, by the way, number 2 in the race. She's played great in this first third of the year. So they're 1-2 in race points thus far this year. Of course, Iga Swiatek is still number 1 overall in the rankings because she dominated so much at this time of year. Last year when Swiatek went on that unbelievable run where she won the Sunshine Double, she won every tournament on clay, she then wins the French. So coming into the clay court season, things have turned a little bit. Rybakina beat Swiatek pretty comfortably a couple of times. Kind of just blew her off the court, and Swiatek looked pretty rattled, when she got down an early break, never really found a way to get in those matches against Rybakina, who's just got firepower from both wings, a big serve. She would be a lot higher. She'd be 3, by the way, in the regular rankings. I'm going to tell you the rankings, just not the race, but just over the last 12 months. Swiatek 1, Sabalenka 2. Pegula, who's just, rock solid, week in, week out. She's at 3, but Rybakina would be ahead of her if she'd got her points from Wimbledon, okay, which she didn't get after winning Wimbledon. So she'd be solidly number 3, close to 2, in fact, behind Sabalenka and Swiatek at 1. So it was a much bigger lead, let's put it that way, for Swiatek until recently, because both those two, Sabalenka and Rybakina, Pegula's, in the mix there. It's a little bit of a drop-off points-wise for Jabeur, who's at the 4th spot. She just won the tournament in Charleston, beating Bencic in the final there, who had beaten Pegula in a long 3-setter. That's always a fun tournament, an excellent tournament. So now they head over to Europe, and this should be where Swiatek starts to refine her game, okay? And she loves playing on that red clay. She's, just destroying people on that surface. So I'm going to look at the draw, because the draw in Stuttgart is always, loaded. You've got Swiatek, the 1 seed, Sabalenka, the 2 seed. By the way, it's a very small draw over there. It's an indoor tournament, so the top 4 seeds have byes. Swiatek, Garcia's the 4 seed. You've got Sabalenka, the 2 seed. Krejcikova is not even seeded, and she would play Sabalenka the second round if she wins her first. Badosa's in there unseeded, plays Kasatkina. Coco Gauff is the 5 seed. She's sort of been stagnant. She's played solid, don't get me wrong, but has she looked like someone that can win a major? I'd say no. I mean, close. Is a French her best shot? She did reach the final last year. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't put her as a favorite. I think she's got a shot. Who would you say would have a better chance for the American women right now, Pegula or Coco Gauff? Kind of probably depends on the surface. Maybe grass, you'd give the Pegula with that flat, as my buddy Cliff Drozd said, flat ball hitting. Gauff's got, better speed, athleticism, not as solid, shot in, shot out. Off the forehand's gotten better. Serve has gotten better, but still, when she plays against a big-time player, at least in the last 6-9 months, talking about Coco, Swiatek, was it Rybakina or Sabalenka who played her in the Sunshine Double? I can't remember. You pretty thoroughly outplayed and not really looking like totally she's in there with a shot. So we'll see how things transpire on the clay. I think it's, again, I don't expect Swiatek to have as huge of a lead. I think both Rybakina and Sabalenka much closer to her. Jabeur, where is she at? She had some issues, injury issues. She's, winning that tournament certainly going to help her. But you have to say that Iga, a solid favorite right now on that European red clay as we look at the women's side of the equation. So that's the only tournament this week for the women, is that one in Stuttgart. And then, of course, we'll look ahead as we move along. And on holding court in these next couple weeks, as I said, we're going to be focusing quite a bit on the China situation, on mental health, particularly over the course of the next, say, 6 to 8 weeks. I'll be doing a tennis-specific podcast once a week as well. Normally that will drop on Tuesday, so I can record it as I'm doing this one on the Monday after the tournaments and give you a sense of where we're at. We'll tackle the Wimbledon story as well moving forward as we get into some of the political issues. Those things will come up. And looking forward to it. Looking forward to a great season of Season 4. Thank you all for listening. And look forward to Chris Fenton on Thursday. We discuss all things China and where we go with that situation. Patrick McEnroe here on Holding Court.
Holding Court is powered by Mudhouse Media.